We all love the sports industry, obviously, but at times it can seem like it is a bit of a bubble from the inside. So in this next session, we're going to hear from some insights from outside of the sports industry, from the fields of entertainment, arts, and business as well. We've, as you can see, assembled a crack team of panelists here. So in a moment, the applause as usual, but please welcome from Universal, the Managing Director of the new Universal Music and Brands Sport, Nouredine Elhaoussine. We've got Lee Daley, the founder and CEO of his own Daley Strategic Advisory, and Patrick Allo, Head of Brand for Virgin across the UK, Europe and the Americas. And to kick things off, a man who knows all about brands himself, I've been told. Oh, and you can give him all the rest of it over the next few minutes as well. SportsPro editor, Eoin Connolly. Everybody, let's give him a huge welcome.
Well, thanks very much, Ori, and welcome back, everyone. At SportsPro, we're lucky enough from time to time to be able to speak to some people who've made a living out of sport, you know, former athletes, former coaches, people who've been in the game, so to speak. And it's interesting that a common refrain, a recurring refrain, is that they've got to adapt to life outside of the bubble. They become so focused on competition, on rivalry, and on their own game that the world beyond them kind of recedes a little bit. But we're all intellectually curious people in this room. We're all well-rounded people, I hope, and we're going to try and explore some themes outside the sports industry in the next half an hour. But before we do venture out of the bubble, I wanted to just stay inside it, where things are reassuring and things make sense, just for a little while longer, and just get a sense from the three of you what the sports industry is, what some of the defining characteristics of the industry are. Lee, do you want to kick us off?
The sports industry, what the sports industry is. It is the sports industry. It trades on probably the most singular, outside of family and loved ones, the most singular form of identity that we have as human beings, which is our affiliation to our local, hopefully, whatever local means in this global world, sports heroes, sports clubs, our national teams. The sports industry trades upon essentially the most socially dynamic thing in the world, which is the game, whatever that might be, cricket, rugby, football. Increasingly, the sports industry is a global unifier. You know, I was in Myanmar last week with the British Chamber of Commerce talking about the rise of the digital economy in Myanmar. 80% of the questions were about what was happening in the English Premier League. And then I was in bars in Yangon watching rugby with completely entranced young, I guess we still call them Burmese. So to me, the sports industry is an industry that trades on passion, is an industry that cultivates relationships between human beings in a very interesting way. It's an industry that has vast economic potential, untapped, due to a number of reasons we might come on to. But to me, it is probably the most interesting and exciting industry right now in the world.
I'll go with what Lee said. No, actually, no, it's a really good answer. I'd probably build on that and just say that sport has the ability to connect communities and cross boundaries and borders and people in a way that I think no other medium, not even entertainment, can do. It's this common language that's spoken around the world. If you're a sports fan, be it a team or a sector or a game or an event, you are a fan of that no matter where you live. It crosses religious boundaries, state boundaries. It really is this amazing connector of people who all have, use the word passion, or have this passion for it. And I think that is incredibly powerful. And we've seen it, years back with, struggles in Iran and in the Middle East where, the ability to pull a country together with sport is so incredibly important. And also sport bringing countries together at the Olympics or other events is so impactful to the world. I think that's the difference of sport.
Is there a tendency to think that some of those things are completely unique to sport, or that there are things that we think of as being completely unique to sport that, in fact, events in music or a shared love of a particular culture or form of cinema or whatever it might be can also achieve, and then perhaps as a result of that, we close ourselves off to those ideas?
I mean, I would say, to be honest with you, that it is unique to sport. I think our affiliations to various forms of entertainment, particularly kind of around music, film, they change as we change as human beings. But I think your sense of identity kindled by, you know, your relationships with your sporting heroes and your clubs are totally unique. I mean, from a brand marketeer's point of view, I mean, the ultimate dream for us as brand guys is we want customers who are loyal for life, right? Well, the ultimate measure of brand equity, you know. We want customers who are passionate about our brands. We want customers who, outside of social networks, create social dynamics around our brand, i.e. that people talk to each other about them. You know, so whether it's a man nowadays, I guess, in his Porsche 911 at Chelsea, or a man in his white van still going up and watching Barnsley, between their peer groups, they will talk about sport almost non-stop, right? And I think the democratization of sport as well, with women coming into sport in a more meaningful way and showing their prowess, like the Women's World Cup was just as good as the Men's World Cup last year. I watched it just as avidly. You know, I think that, you know, the same is true across races, gender, sexes. Sport dominates conversation and fosters loyalty and fosters social conversations outside of technology like nothing else. And I think people stay true most of the time to their brands. Although there's lots of new Manchester City fans around. I'm not sure where they came from.
I will add as well that sport is unique because you can try to play as Cristiano Ronaldo. You are very connected with your idol, but it's very difficult to sing or dance like Michael Jackson. So you feel so connected, and then you can just act like your idol. So sport is unique, and it's like emotion and passion, connection.
So sport is entertainment, right? It is entertainment. It's competitive entertainment, but when you actually boil it down, it's storytelling. So, and that is very historic. That goes back to the early days. We watch sport. There's a story that unfolds in front of us. We participate in that as a spectator. Sometimes we participate in that as an athlete, which I'm not a former athlete. But then after you spectate it, you turn around and you become it, and that you tell the story again of what you just experienced. And that is a fundamental human trait, that's storytelling. And we talk about how you build brands. We build great brands through great storytelling of what that experience is. And I think the beauty of watching sport is only about 90%, well, no, I would say it's flipped. 10% watching it, 90% is the ability to share it with someone else who wasn't there or maybe was there, and you're kind of recounting it.
Interesting, actually. It's a beautiful answer, and you're right. I mean, I think the interesting thing with sport is, you know, we have an identity to, you know, particular icons, be they clubs or players or whatever, but the narrative unfolds in the most dramatic, real way. You know, so I watched last week, you know, I thought, okay, I'll watch South Africa. You know, obviously they're going to win against Japan. And what unfolded was so spectacularly unbelievable and shocking in the best possible way that only sport could deliver that. I mean, no one on a bloody stage rewrites Shakespeare and improvises around it. You know what's going to happen in Macbeth, right? And
no one good. Anyway.
No, but I think that, you know, that is the really truly and utterly enchanting nature of sport, is the fact that drama unfolds before your very eyes. You know.
Yeah. Okay, but I mean, sport is wonderful, is the message so far. But I mean,
it's a good summary.
Well, yeah, it is. Otherwise,
summary.
You guys wouldn't be here.
Exactly. But I mean, if we're addressing some of the deficiencies of sport as an industry, and maybe the ways in which it's not realizing the opportunities that it has, where do we start? I mean, does sport, for example, does it make enough space or the right kind of spaces for brands to occupy within it?
I would start with the data, collecting data, studying data, and then use data for the brands. Data is key.
I would probably address accessibility. So let's divide sport in two. So you've got major sport, which would be big sponsors, big, beautiful venues. And then you've got kind of rural sport, which is very community, local. It could be as easy as a football pitch that's created in an abandoned lot with, you know, a couple balls have been donated. That's equally as important, even more so, as sport. I think where we have the accessibility issue is a lot of these fans who are very rural community fans want this experience, but we've made this almost so inaccessible in the price of tickets to fund expensive stadiums that put strains on local communities through raising bonds or other taxes that, and then we pay athletes so much that the ticket prices have to be so much that we love encouraging the local community to play sports, and they want to experience this as well, but there's that barrier that happens. And it'd be great to remove that barrier and make this much more accessible.
I think your question addressed a couple of issues. You talked about the deficiencies in kind of, let's say, the sports industry, and then you talked about the accessibility for brands. I mean, let me start with the latter. I mean, I think that with the increasing globalization of sport, with basically we're linked together through media, whatever that media is. You have got a global marketplace for cricket, right? Beyond the countries that play it, rugby is becoming a global phenomenon. My friend Brett Gosper is doing a very good job at World Rugby, and the fastest growing sport in the US. And I think that from a brand point of view, where there is sport, there is passion. Where there is passion, there is emotion. And if you understand your brand, you understand your sport, and you are in management, right? You have to be able to measure the equity of your sport, the equity of your particular organization, and strategically maximize that. I think the accessibility thing is a very interesting thing, because I think if you look at it, I for a very short, inglorious period left my job running Saatchi and went to Manchester United. It was an absolute disaster. But I looked at Manchester United at the time, and I think at the time they were espousing, we have 450 million fans worldwide, and they had an income base of about 260 million. I was like, that's not a good business. What's your average ARPU per fan? So some of them have access to the stadium. I'm a season ticket holder, have been for 30 years. But very few of us ever go. But that doesn't mean that a fan in India is any less passionate than me. The issue is, from a management point of view, you have to understand what constitutes a materially interesting, beautifully enchanting experience for that fan in India that they are prepared to pay for, right? So if you're in management, you're in commerce. And the failure of sports organizations is a failure of effective strategic planning to optimize the return on the passion of their fans, and to give them experiences that they enjoy and are prepared to pay for. So when I would, if I go back to that story, I said my strategy was 1 cent a day. If I've got 500 million fans around the world, I don't care where the revenue comes from, I want to average 1 cent a day, right? So why can't we be ghostwriting Wayne Rooney's player blog, his training blog every day? Where someone says, I'll buy that for $1 a month. So I think, to me, if you go back to deficiencies of the sports industry, I think it's optimizing the return on that passion. I think it's understanding how to strategically plan effectively on a global basis, and then having done that, how to then pitch that back to brands. So you maximize your sponsorship revenue, you maximize the intimacy and engagement you have with your fan base in that way, but it starts with management.
I want to come back to the point about communities perhaps in a couple of minutes, but just to pick up on this idea of monetizing interest, on a global scale, and giving people things that connect them to the club. I mean, are there things to be learned from, for example, the model that music has more or less been forced to adopt in the last 5 or 10 years, of switching to a subscription model, of giving people, access whenever they want it to music through mediums like Spotify or whatever it might be? Does sport do things in too monolithic, too sealed off for fashion? What do we think about that?
Again, I mean, I think what's interesting, if you look at most sports, a lot of the money comes through, television deals that are negotiated by the league. So if you look at the English Premier League, everyone celebrates its great success, and that's ironically, almost, the clubs are lucky because Richard Scudamore has been running the English Premier League and has been negotiating great deals, and it's become an increasingly popular league. But in terms of what the clubs themselves are doing, I'm really not so sure. What was your question? I bloody lost my track. I just got off a red eye, by the way, and I was in Myanmar. I've just come back from New York. I'm tired.
I think you're doing great. It feels like we're about to change, right? feels like something is about to happen, and it's almost, and I think a lot of the audience would agree, it's almost one of the last kind of monolithic, historic, fundamental businesses that is about to implode. Not implode, maybe evolve is a better word. But we've seen it happen. You mentioned music. We've seen it happen with other forms of entertainment, with other, when you look at Netflix, when you look at, the democratization of all these other sectors, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of where will you be placed when that happens, and will you lead that change, or will you follow it? So I think, but it is going to change. This model, it needs to change.
I will probably just add that we are moving from a media buying strategy to an audience buying. Brands want to be like very close from their fans. And in the music industry, we know how to do it. At Universal Music, we know how to connect brands directly to their fan. We build like very specific communities. And with the sport, we can do the same thing. Just connect them, create experiences, propose like money can buy experiences, and make it like very clear and efficient for the brands to talk directly to their community, to their fan and customers.
I mean, I was in New York yesterday talking to a kind of private equity group about sports management, and when in any other form of business, one of the key things in terms of a customer relationship is really deep understanding of that person's business. So you understand how you can add value, and from a fan point of view, it's about empathy, which is how you create value because you understand the way they live around your brand and you understand how you can enchant them. But from a business point of view, building your sponsorship proposals, building your commercial proposals to large brands, global brands, you have to have that strategic savvy to be able to do it, because otherwise, the sports industry everybody gets excited about, and loads of clients, you go to the European Cup final. I was in Berlin this year, so there's about 70,000 corporate bums on seats and about 10,000 proper fans, right? But that is not representative necessarily of deep engagement, right? It's not necessarily representative of anything other than short-term sponsorship deals and a lot of corporate ticket allocations. A lot of the sponsorship deals don't last that long because the clubs themselves, the leagues and the clubs are lazy, right? So even when I went into United, and I've looked at football a lot since that time, I've done some big deals in football, the quality of strategic thinking was pitiful in terms of looking at really significant brands, Anheuser-Busch. Even the technical deal with Nike was underserviced. At the time when I went there, I said, how can we possibly maintain these relationships? As an agency CEO, I would have been shot with that paucity of deep knowledge about my client's business. And the return on investment was, oh yeah, they've got the seats, we'll give them tickets and a bit of hospitality. But you want to hang on to these people who want to maximize the yield from that relationship. You have to have depth of strategic understanding. You have to have that knowledge. That way you will pitch and win more often from a sponsor, from a club point of view or a league point of view, and you will retain and increase yield for a greater period of time.
Let's talk about depth in a slightly different sense. James and Brett were talking earlier about the Brooklyn of London in Shoreditch. I live in a competing Brooklyn of London just down the road in Brixton, where you see lots of musical events coming up from the grassroots, lots of cultural events coming up from the grassroots. There's also a team just down the road called Dulwich Hamlet, which has become very popular in the last year or two, partly through being an authentic grassroots football team. But are other industries better than sport at being aware of the existence of these communities and at reaching them and perhaps making that slightly deeper connection by genuinely supporting what it is that they do?
I think you hit on. I think music is a great example of that. I think that the challenge with music, potentially with sport as well, is keeping it pure. So the sound that comes out of a very kind of locally grown grassroots music group or drive, right? That can be changed completely when they go to a big label. When they go to a big label, they can lose some of that initial essence that made them so special and so local. I think that could be the challenge. The beauty is that you're cultivating this talent locally, and it comes from a very honest place. As far as other industries who do it better, I'm trying to think of beyond entertainment, how that happens. I mean, we've seen, I'm a big foodie, I've seen local food happen the same way, slow food, sustainable food, farm to table originated, in the Bay Area, and that was a big movement as well that went global. I think it's keeping that real to the consumers, because they'll be the first ones to call you out on it. If they see you go too corporate, they will tell you, and you'll know about it. And the beauty now in the marketing world that we live in is that they will vote against you and walk away, and everyone will know about it. They'll use social media, and suddenly your brand will crash. It will crash.
I think as well, it's understanding community. It's a strange question, by the way, but if you look at the community of an English Premier League club, that community now for a lot of the clubs is a truly global community. So when you're looking at activating it, you say, well, what do you actually do there? And that is a very relevant question. But I think when you think about communities as a specifically local hipster kind of environment you live in, you trendy thing.
I'm moving away soon enough.
Right. Okay. You may be asking a question which has relevance, but I would be very careful about pocketing it in and around that. I mean, upstart music festivals, they will always be there because kids love to congregate around music. And they will pay for that experience. And if you're a savvy music marketeer, you will find a way of building relationship and capturing data and all of that stuff. I'm not sure it's necessarily true for a lot of big sports franchises. But I do celebrate anything, however, that allows more people in local communities to play sport. And I think that's where the leagues and the sports clubs and even some of the stars can help propagate that involvement in sport, which is I think is diminishing with our young people in society.
So, I mean, one of the points you raised there is a question perhaps of learning some of the right lessons when you look at phenomena that are happening in other industries and in other parts of popular culture.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to open it up at this point to the floor. We've got about 10 minutes left. So has anybody got a question? I can't actually quite make people out. I'm dazzled by the wattage of intellect in the room, I think, and also the lighting rigs. But
it's always good to go on post-lunch as well.
Yeah. We've got a question just there, yep.
Okay, Lynn Lashbrook, Sports Management Worldwide. We're over here for the NFL game at Wembley. I just want your comment. I call it cross-pollination. Rugby player playing for the San Francisco 49ers. Jacksonville's been playing over here every year. Talent discovery. I just see a tremendous globalization of every sport, cricket, rugby. Soccer in the States. I grew up in Kansas. I thought it was a communist plot. I'm a season ticket holder with the Portland Timbers. We love soccer, if I may. I'm just fascinated with the globalization and the cross-pollination of every sport, and there really is no territorial rights when you come down to it.
So I'll kick off on that one. I'll say it's all good, right? I know there are a couple people who are from the NBA as well. I think when the NBA does their tour around the world promoting basketball, I think that's good. It's good, right? When you do those friendly matches, those football-friendly matches in the U.S., that's great. We should be doing that. Why not? I mean, the idea isn't that one country owns a particular sport or are known for it. It's that they have the ability to share it and go global, and I think it's an amazing thing. I think cross-pollination is good when it comes to this industry.
And it's connecting people, I guess, internationally in ways that are happening in other things, but perhaps not quite so profoundly. As you say, it's not something that, other interests are not things that people are connected to with quite such permanence. Are there any other questions at this point? Okay. I wanted to ask about looking to other sectors, maybe for solutions to problems that exist within the sports industry. I mean, we're sitting here in a cricket ground. 2020 has revolutionized the thinking in that sport. It's also kind of seeped into the thinking of a lot of other sports, and they are looking for short form properties that they can cram into given television slots. But at the same time, you're seeing a considerable amount of success in the television industry, and particularly in with modes of delivery like Netflix, in getting people really involved in long form content, and not just getting them to watch it, but also making it something that's seen as, you know, as exciting and, for want of a better word, as quite cool. Are there lessons that can be learned about how those longer form events are branded, or is it just a quirk of those two industries?
Well, you can. Sorry, I'll kick off. There's a couple different ways to look at this. So 2020 is a good example of that. And we were talking. I went to my first 2020 match, and I think we were at the same match. And one, I was overdressed. I wasn't expecting it to be quite like baseball. I was kind of shocked by the cheerleaders. The beer cup snake was something I'd never witnessed, and didn't seem in keeping with the idea of cricket.
It really was your first game.
It really was my first game. And I think the thought was that you've changed the product. So you've altered the product to reach a different audience. Altered it not only in the way that it's played, the length of it, but also the experience that the spectators were having relating to the story that's unfolding in front of them. And I thought, you've altered the product. Is that good or bad? Well, it is exposing cricket to a different audience, but it's not really cricket. It's something different. It's like cricket light. So you can change the product. That's one way to go, or you can change the delivery. And I think Netflix is a good example of, they didn't change the product. They just changed how we received it. So through a Netflix model, you were able to get things in much more chunkable ways as you wanted to digest it. So they changed the delivery, and that was very smart, and people were open to that. And I think people could be open to either one of those, but you need to look at what the product is before you decide if you're going to change it or you're going to change how it's delivered.
I would say for the music, it's accessible everywhere. If you want to hear a song or watch a video, you can watch it on YouTube, anywhere. When you want to watch a game, I'm from France. I love my club Marseille. If I am in the US, it's like impossible. So if we can build a kind of platform and make it accessible, all the sport, all the games, all the sport events for everybody, it will be perfect. But now we are more in like very located TV rights for sports, so we just need to make it more accessible.
Are we seeing more cross-pollination in how things are delivered, particularly, you know, looking at the music industry, particularly the real set-piece events? We have Glastonbury in this country. You have things like Coachella. Are they being delivered, particularly in the media space, in a similar way to how you might expect an Olympics or a World Cup? Is there, you know, is there any kind of crossover there that you could see?
The perfect crossover for me is Super Bowl. It's a game, an amazing game, but most of people watch the Super Bowl for the entertainment with music show, Madonna, Beyonce, and the commercial. So it's the perfect place for brands, music, and sport. For me, it's the best case.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yep, we've got one over there.
Just a general question for the panel. You know, is the sports industry doing enough for activism and global activism? Like, you know, we saw like music at Global Citizens Festival in New York this week. The music industry is really, really good at coming together to work on global activism issues. The absence of any major sports stars at that event was notable. So, you know, are we good as an industry while individual sports players might make differences on a global scale for this? You know, is there anything we can learn from the music industry to make sports stand out like that as well?
I would say, and I may speak in ignorance of some initiatives, but I would say no. And I think if you go back to, you know, I was involved in Live Earth in 2007, and we put that together very quickly with Microsoft. But that was around using music as a platform and a lot of directorial talent and acting talent from around the world to try and address the issue of the environment. But, you know, I think music is nothing, for example, compared to football. Football's a religion, and, you know, and I think that the people in the game It's a very different species of people to in other areas of entertainment, if you will. And I think there are other forms of entertainment that have a degree of sophistication right through the value chain. But if you look at the power of some of the icons in football, and there are some ridiculously powerful, iconic figures in football and in other sports. You look at Sachin Tendulkar in cricket, you look at Roger Federer, who's a wonderful human being, and you look at some of our managers. You look at Arsène Wenger, he's an iconic figure, he's an intellectual Frenchman, he has great elegance and class. You look at Mourinho, who people would recognize for his leadership qualities. You may not like the way he plays the game, you may not like the way he behaves all the time, but the man is a leader. You look at Sir Alex Ferguson, you look at these iconic figures. I am absolutely convinced that if there was a World Sport Day for Peace, and those people got up and spoke, and we said, play football together, it doesn't matter what religion you are, and go out and play tennis together, that would make a difference. I really believe it, but it is not done. And I think one of the issues with football is, one of the issues with soccer, really is greed, unmitigated greed. Everything has a price tag attached to it. Every single minute of a player's life has a price tag attached to it. And I think at some point someone needs to stand up and say, we have the power to affect change in society, and we should do something about that. I mean, obviously soccer has to get its own house in order. FIFA, is not exactly, best in class in terms of governance. But, I think sports can make a huge difference in the world. And, for the gentleman, I think it's a great question to ask.
I think, so building on that, what matters with activism, right? Reach. And what can athletes provide? Reach. They have these enormous fan bases that they can activate. You mentioned the global goals, the UN global goals, and trying to reach 7 billion people in 7 days. Absolutely, athletes should be involved in that. Doesn't mean that they need to be on stage with Beyonce. They could do it in their own way and activate their own fan base, and they shouldn't need to be prompted to do that. They should be doing that because they know that as leaders, they have a responsibility to activate their fans to help make these goals famous, which is part of it.
I mean, it strikes me as well that there's something of a fear of politicization in sport, and some of that maybe is connected to what is seen as an obligation to your sponsors, what is seen as an obligation to your paymasters in other areas, and there's a real anxiety about causing offense. I mean, you mentioned the FIFA thing. It's notable how few players speak out about FIFA. That's their own sport, their own their own world. Even beyond things like the recent banners about the refugee crisis and whether football clubs would allow them into their stadiums. I mean, is that something that can be addressed? Is that a sign of perhaps a lack of maturity in the industry when it comes to its relationships with brands and with media?
Sorry, just on the athlete part, I wouldn't want an athlete to speak about anything that they didn't genuinely feel or wasn't authentic to them. So if they aren't able to speak about the refugee crisis or have a genuine thought on stadiums allowing refugees in, I wouldn't want them to comment on it because I think it would come across to everyone as being not from an authentic place.
But I think that there are particular themes one could play with, and I think if you go back, I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, what is sport? It's the coming together of human beings in play, isn't it? And it's a completely, most of the time when kids are young, it's a completely depoliticized thing. It doesn't matter. What matters is play, and within that context, there is a narrative of human understanding that is very, very important, that is lost along the way as things do become politicized. And I think maybe there is a maxim around sport that the federations could get together around that has some very important coded human meaning. And perhaps then people would step out and say, yeah, this is why I play. There was a beautiful commercial by Nike back in the 90s. Some of you may have remember it, particularly anybody who's here from the US, which was about how sport empowers girls. And the line on the thing was, if you let me play. And it's really one of the most beautiful pieces of advertising you could ever imagine. But it was, if you let me play, I will be less likely to drop out of school. I will be less likely to be a teenage pregnancy. I will be less likely to get in trouble. I will be much more likely to have a better relationship with my family. And it was two young little girls, or 2 or 3 little girls, in a kind of playground, and they were just doing voice to camera. But it was so beautiful in terms of the power of sport. And maybe there is something that the federations could get together and the leaders in this room and say, actually, let's try and figure out what the narrative is and create a platform. I mean, we did Live Earth in 13 months, top to bottom, the largest live music event in history, because a group of very empowered people got together who had very significant relationships in media and with brands to do the environment thing. And maybe there is something in sport. You know, we do live in very, very troubled times right now.
So I'm excited to, I really want to stay for Josie's presentation on This Girl Can. So I think that was an amazing campaign. That was very purposeful. It was rooted in athletics. It addressed a need. And I'm part of the Virgin management team. And as part of Virgin, we're focused on purpose. And purpose to change things for the better, change things for good, as we say. I think that campaign was brilliant. So I don't know if Josie's already here, but I'd love to see that again or hear her talk about it.
Well, certainly that tees us up very nicely for what we've got coming up. I'm afraid we don't have any more time for this panel, but thank you very much, gents, for what was a really fascinating discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.